Okay, all right, with Hashem's help, we're here, Baruch Hashem, in between the parshiot of Shoftim and Kisetzim. And we've reached Kiddush Levana of Elul, which means we're 25% through the month of Elul. That's years ago. And somehow the Emas Hadin, the idea of Elul, is so much more present here in Eretz Yisrael than it was Schwartz. Because it seems like the whole rhythm of the country wraps itself around. Rosh Chodesh Elul, all the yeshivas, people going back, everything's starting. First PTA meetings are always on the same night from 7 schools, and you can't get a parking spot. It's just where everybody's at, the mindset of Elul. I spoke a little about Elul last time. But I think this is going to give you a very interesting insight into what the very, very dramatic difference between Elul and Tishrei is, and where our mindset has to be now for the next couple of weeks. All right, so let's begin with a question. A very simple question. Albeit that Moshe Rabbeinu started the Parsha of Shoftim very straightforward. It said, Shoftim v'Shoftim titin l'kol Moshe Rabbeinu, right? This was not the first time that he has discussed Shoftim with the Jewish people in the book of Devarim. Who recalls where else Moshe Rabbeinu had already addressed the issue of Shoftim? And with some detail. There's a lot of detail. No, I'm talking about in Sefer Devarim. You're right, and Yisro is, you can compare those two stories. Really, that's Parshanut is really to compare those two stories. But I'm going to suggest we'll do the same thing within the book of Devarim itself, which also raises a bigger question. Moshe, this was one thing that always troubled me about when you're learning Devarim, because I'll go at great lengths to carefully tease out why the book of Devarim is different than all of the other Svarim of Chumash. The reason being is that somehow the voice of Moshe and his creative expression, right, is what is the coherent, unifying factor of this book of Devarim altogether. So in other words, Moshe Rabbeinu is as a teacher. He's not merely a mouthpiece through which God speaks, which is the rest of the Torah. Literally, Hashem, the energy of Hashem is articulated through the voice box of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's not Sefer Devarim. That's really not Devarim. Sefer Devarim is that there was a series of mitzvahs and instructions that Moshe had to convey. Lahavdil talking points. He had to talk about a lot of dinim and halachos. But the way he crafted it, and the way he formulated it, and even the order in which he presented it, had something to do with Moshe Rabbeinu. So that if you look at Moshe Rabbeinu as giving a discourse, a speech, a training, really that's what it was. It was a training seminar, lahavdil, of how to succeed going into Eretz Yisrael, right? How to, with the expert, all access to all the wisdom. I'm going to teach you. How do I know that? If you look at the very beginning of Devarim, what does Moshe say? He says, look, this is my final set of teachings to you. It's going to take how many weeks does this seminar last? How many weeks does it last? 5 weeks, right? From Rosh Chodesh Shvat until Zayin Adar. So they have about a month to process this. And he says, Elo had-devarim asher diber Moshe. Okay, usually you say what? Like, Vayedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Daber el b'nei Yisrael. Here we say, asher diber Moshe el kol Yisrael. We give a location, Be'ever Yarden, Ba'midbar, with all the problems that they had. He said, basically, Rabosai, let's learn from our mistakes. Because we have a primary goal. And that primary goal begins with the second pasuk. Achad Asar Yom Michorev. 11 days since Sinai. Actually, that would be a good title also. 11 days from Sinai. Now 11 is a very weird number, let's face it, it's a strange number. I didn't have a chance to look at it into it mathematically. Anybody math people here? What's unique about the number 11?
Prime.
What's that? It's a prime number, which means
And it doesn't break up into anything other than 1 times itself.
Infinity.
okay, it's prime, it's infinite, it's 1 plus 1 is 1 somehow, right? Mispar Katan is 1. It represents which letter? Aleph. Okay, so it's basically a start, an opportunity, a unique opportunity, something very, very, very rare or special. It also, from a Jewish context, is parked between two important numbers that we have everything to do with the book of Dvarim. Think backwards to 10 and forwards to 12. Hello, what does that teach you? What is 10? When you think of the book of Dvarim, what 10 are we talking about? Seres Dibros, right here at the beginning, Parshas Chana. And where are we talking about? 11 days from where? From Chorev, where the Torah was given. Okay? And where are we going? We're going into Eretz Yisrael. We're on Iver HaYarden, so we're about to take, what's the first thing the Jews do when they get across the Yarden? The very first thing that they do. What's their first mitzvah? They go across the Yarden. Very first one. What do? They have to take how many stones out of the Yarden? And how many stones are they commanded to take out of Mizbeach? 12 stones. And set them up. Right? In other words, 11 represents the transition between the theoretical, which is Yeseres Dibros, the blueprint, and the Lamaisa, and putting it into practice. Literally, they laid the cornerstones of what would take 480 years to accomplish, which is the 12 tribes united in Yerushalayim around the Beis Hamikdash. Only took about 500 years.
Who wrote those on the stones?
Moshe.
On the 12?
They set up the stones on Har Ebal, and he covered them. He wrote the Torah on it in 70 languages and covered it over so no one could see it. That's another problem. If you really want, first of all, why 70 languages? Okay, and why can't anybody see it? And the answer to that, I believe, is that we're not in this for ourselves. Why does Hashem want us to go on this great journey, 11-day journey, and establish Beis Hamikdash? It's for everybody. It's for the benefit of the world. By laying the cornerstone with the Shivim Lashon, you're basically saying, begin with the end in mind. We want this to be a Beit Tfilah, Yikareh L'Kol Ha'amim. It's going to be called the house of prayer for all people. So better make it readable, what we're here to talk about. If you remember the shiur we gave about the lost wisdom of Yerushalayim, okay, which we'll be talking about that more. Essentially, it made a very powerful statement, is that we are here in Israel to teach wisdom to the world. That's what that is. Except, you have to want. You have to want. We're not going to go out there. We're not leaving the land of Israel to coerce you. Very interesting. That's not what Islam did. That's not what the Crusaders did. That's their whole thing. Go out and convert everybody, right? Spread the word. No, that's not our way. Because our way is a derech of shalom. We don't want to fight with you over it. We're going to just set an example, and you're going to be attracted to us. When was the time of peak attraction? When did well, they always were attracted to Jews. But when is, and the world is always actually obsessed with Jews. But Shlomo Melech was a power of attraction. He didn't have to do anything. Everybody came to him. So by marking those 12 stones, I would like to suggest that 11 is that transitional number that represents the book of Dvarim. Dvarim is the instructions of how to get from the 10 Commandments all the way into the 12 cornerstones and beyond. Now, if that is the case, then Moshe Rabbeinu is making a very coherent presentation. And it has to go in some sort of order, right? In some sort of logic. So, I'd like to take a look at an overview and then see if we can then look at the problems of Shoftim and interpret it in that light. Okay? So, let's do it this way. Let's look at the psukim of Shoftim in the book of in the Parsha of Dvarim. Okay, here's what it says. I want you to pay very careful attention because I'm going to ask you to note the differences, okay? I'm going to give you what it says in Dvarim. If you have a chumash, you can look inside. Really, if you want chumashim, just look inside. You'll know. Is there enough chumashim to go along? It's enough chumashim on the table. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shachar li'Yivra.
Amen.
Well, here's what happened. At the very, very beginning of the book of Devarim, it says, Re'ei natati lifnechem es ha'aretz, this is pasuk ches, bo u'rishu es ha'aretz. That's it. Hashem, Moshe is telling everybody, we got a plan, we're going into Eretz Yisrael, we're going to take Yerusha and Eretz Yisrael. But then Moshe goes off on a little tangent about the Shoftim. He says as follows, Va'omer aleichem ba'eis hahi lemor, lo uchal levadi se'eis eschem. I cannot what?
Carry you.
I cannot carry. Now, who carries who, generally speaking? When we speak about carrying somebody, what, adults carry each other around? You know, unless you're those guys with the, you know, in the Oriental countries where they,
Sumerista.
is it called sumarisa?
Sumo.
No, we're just talking
Oh, a sumo wrestler, okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, they can just pick you up and twirl you around, but Moshe Rabbeinu was saying to them, you are in need of somebody to carry you. You generally carry a child. What?
You're immature.
in a sense. He says, and I can't do it myself. So why? Because Hashem Lokechem Yirbeschem V'Hinchem Hayom K'Kochrei Shemayim L'Ro. There's just too many of you. How can I give personalized attention to each and every one of you? In fact, that was Yisro's complaint. Because Moshe Rabbeinu, you cannot imagine him wanting anything more to do than to help another Jew. That's Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu is to help another Jew. That's all. We mentioned last week about the Tasha Rabbi. Just do good for a Jew. Get up in the morning. What can I do for a Jew? What can I do for a Jew? Here's the story. So I got up this morning. I said I have to be true to my word. What can I do for a Jew? So I go to I drop my kids off. I help them. I'm studying for the test. I go to park in front of the shul. I go to the mikvah. Then I go down. And somebody walks up to me and goes, "Are you going to class this morning?" And I said, "No." He said, but I said, "Do you need a ride?" He goes, "Yeah, I want to catch like the 8 o'clock meeting. It's like 1 minute to 8." And I said, "Okay, I'll take you. Hashem sent you to me. I'll take you." He starts asking me questions. Who are you? What do you do? I said, I'll give a couple of shiur. And he goes to me, "Wow, I saw you in shul many times. I didn't know you do all those things." Like he's so impressed. I went, "Really? Wow." And I said, it just was like by appreciating others, sometimes you get a sense of appreciation for what you are doing, for what you are contributing. So there you go. So Moshe Rabbeinu, he wants to sit with every single Jew and help him solve all of his problems. I heard a beautiful story about the Sefer Rebbe. Everybody in the whole universe goes to the Sefer Rebbe with all their problems, at least in one, right? Well, people here run there to ask the problems. So two guys went into the Sefer Rebbe, and they said to him, "Rebbe, we want a bracha." He goes, "Well, okay, what's your problem?" He goes, "We don't have any problems." So he says, "1 minute." He starts bawling, crying. They're looking at the Rebbe, what do we do? What do we do wrong, We offended the Rebbe. He goes, "Everybody comes here with their problems, and I can't cry. I have to just try to help them, you know what I'm saying? Now, I'm just going to let it all out. You guys don't have a problem." Collecting all those tears. What are you going to do with it? One of my Rabbi, Lazar Mordechai Koenig, who passed away this past year, very tragic. He died a relatively young man. He had lungs that were black with disease. He got a lung transplant. He got another 10 years or so of life, and he continued helping people. The problems that this man was confronted with, even in those last 10 years when he was a lung transplant, okay? I truly believe he just went as far as he could until his strength gave out and just kept taking on all the pain, all the problems. So that's what Moshe Rabbeinu wants to do. He said, but you know what? I'm not going to be able to give you the love that I want to. That was Yisro's complaint. He says, Nabol Tibol, Gamata Gamazeh, you're not going to be able to do it, and they're not going to be, it's not going to be effective for them either. So what are we going to do? What system did he make? Judges, but what kind of judges? What kind of judges? The ones that help carry people. Now, if you go into court to fight a ticket, right, is that judge going to baby you? Oh, poor thing. You went 150 miles an hour in a 60 zone. You must have been hungry. You must have been tired. It must have been a mistake. Let's forget about it this time. No. You get the book thrown at you, right? Okay, so what are we talking about? What kind of judges are we talking about? Sarei alafim, Sarei me'ot, Sarei chamishim, and Sarei asarot. One judge for 10 people. I mean, we Jews can be contentious at times, but a judge for every 10 people? Yeah, chocolate, yeah, unfortunately. Maybe you need more than one. But it's true. But these are the judges of Seis carrying. And look what Moshe says. First he says to them, Havu lachem anashim chachamim nevonim v'yiduim. Okay, in order to be this guy who could be like Moshe, they have to have three qualities. They have to be chachamim, they have to be nevonim, and they have to be yiduim, they have to be well known. Now, Rashi breaks this down for us. What does this really mean? Well, you would think chachamim means, brilliant. You have to be very brilliant. No. He says, kisufim, beloved. Everybody loves them. Everybody loves talking to them. Like going to the Zayda, Oh, I want to go to Zaydi's house. They're beloved. How do you become chacham, by the way? Ezu chacham, alamed mikol adam. So it's humble, it's lovable. Not austere, not judge-like. Non-judgmental. Non-judgmental judges. Did you ever hear of such a thing? Non-judgmental judges. Unevoinim, mevinim, davar mitoch davar. Ma ben chachamim lenevoinim. This was a question that was asked in the times of the Greeks. Arios asked Rabbi Yossi, Greeks, Romans. He says, "Chacham daimel shulchani ashir mevim lo dinarim leros roeh ukishe'ein mevim lo yoshev tohen." He says, you know what? A chacham waits to be presented a problem, right? You present a problem, and he looks at it, and he'll give you his opinion. But a navon is like a shulchani tagar. He's like a professional money changer. He doesn't wait for business to come to him. He needs supply. He needs business, right? He needs coins to change. If he's sitting there without coins, he's out of business. So he's got to go constantly looking to make deals with people. You've got euros, you've got dollars, you've got shekels, what do you got? He's out there. So not only are they chacham, but not just sitting there waiting for people to come and cry with their problems. He's actually out there looking to say, oh, there's a little problem over here, maybe it needs a little intervention. Go out and say, Moshe Rabbeinu, go out and see what's doing with Klal Yisrael. That's really, to me, I take that Musar to heart very much, saying, yeah, whatever you're doing, but did you get up this morning and did you say, I gotta do something with Klal Yisrael? You say, I gotta have breakfast, I have to go to an appointment, I have to take care of this important thing, I have to. Yeah, but that's not an Ish Novan. Each one wants to know. He wants to be in the know about what's going on. Take the pulse of the community. Take the pulse of the neighbors, for goodness sake. And the last thing that he said is Yuduim l'shivteichem. Now the Yuduim l'shivteichem, Rashi explains here that if a person would come in a disguise, I wouldn't know who he is, right? But you know these people. These people have a reputation for goodness. They are good people. They are lauded by your shevet. They represent the best qualities that your tribe espouses to. So they're not unknowns. They're well-knowns. And that can help a lot because there's a level of trust. Okay? So what are the three elements? In order to be a a non-judgmental judge. Number one is be a chacham, meaning be beloved, learn from people, respect people, ezu chacham lomed mikol adam, be beloved. That's what says the Mishnah always says exactly that. He says that somebody who learns Torah lishma, nikra ahuv, oves hamakom, oves habrius, misameach es hamakom, misameach es habrius. That's the litmus test. That's the real litmus test. And Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't force it down their throats. He says, Havlochem anashim, you know what? Bring me some of these kind of people, va'asimeim b'roshechem, and I'll put them as your head. Like, you choose. Don't tell me. I'm not going to tell you. You choose. Democratic process. Demokratia. And vatanu osi v'tomru tova davar asher dibarto la'asos. That's a great idea. Buy-in. Not forcing them to do anything. You want, fine. You don't want, also good. You can't. Judges are not optional. You can't say, let's see if we want to have courts. Let's see if we want to have this. That's not what we're talking about here. And he says, I said, listen to this, unbelievable. Shamoa bein achechem. Listen between the brothers. What are they fighting with each other right now? But really, what are they? Really, they're brothers. Your job is to listen and to be able to portray to both of them somehow that they are brothers. Ushafatem tzedek behu bein ish ubein achiv, between a man and his brother, ubein gero, between a ger. Ger, it's not just about brotherly love, restoring brotherly love. It's about love of a fellow Jew. Okay, compare that to our this week's parsha, this past week's parsha. Shoftim v'shodrim titnu v'sharechem. Where are the judges? Where are the judges sitting? They're walking around Navonim, taking the pulse of the community, sitting down, having lunch with people? No. They're sitting in one specific place. Where is that? B'sha'arechem. It's one court per city. Excuse me, a city could be thousands and thousands and thousands of people. What happened to the Sarei Asaros? What happened to the captains of tens? What do you mean, one city? I mean, it's against your whole thesis, Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, you said, Lo says, I can't do it. But you're going to leave just one court? And by the way, those courts were generally courts of 23. Because they had to have the ability to judge capital cases, put people to death, put animals to death that killed people, right? And try cases of Avodah Zarah, of Chilul Shabbos, of Arayos, all kinds of things. 23 for the whole town. Doesn't matter how many thousands of people there are. Period, end of story. They might have small bati dinim of 3 here and there across the city, but so completely different. And here it says lo takiru panim b'mishpat. It also says the same thing here. It's past week's parsha. But there's one difference. Here it says kakatan kagodol tishma'un. Listen to the little people. Listen to the person who's seemingly inconsequential, right? Katan kagadol, make that katan into somebody important, and the somebody important don't fawn over him. Lo taguro mipnei ish. Again, look at the individual, maybe the Nebuch individual. Ki mishpat lelohim huva davar sherikshem mikem tikrun. Then, if you bring something to me, what will be ushema'ativ? I'll listen. Shouldn't it say listen? What verb should it say over there? Listen. Judges don't listen. What do judges do? Of course they listen, but what do? They judge. They make decisions. They give out the law. They execute. They punish. They decide. Chayav pater. That's their job. No. I'm going to listen. The court of listening, of non-judgmental judges. That's what Moshe was started out with. Now, but if you look at the Parshas Shoftim, let's look at that for a second, okay? Parshas Shoftim. Unbelievable. Moshe says, "No, Shoftim titan l'chal v'chol sharecha." I'm not asking you. I'm not giving you options to go make a search committee for judges, a search committee. We're going to formulate a search committee. We're going to have candidates. We're going to look for the qualities of all people who are Chachamim, Nevonim, and Yodim may apply. You know, for the position. That's the policy of the search committee that we're going to have. What are you talking about? Shoftim is Shoftim. I don't care who it is. And I do care that he's good, but just make sure that there's a court. And Lishvatecha, meaning it's cities that connect to a regional court. Now the way it went, which is actually very interesting in Sanhedrin, is what was the judicial system ideally of Klal Yisrael in Eretz Yisrael? You had the city judges, court of 23, and then you had a high court for the Shevet of 23, okay, which had students, so they always were able to draw in students as high as 71 if they needed to, okay? Not just in Yerushalayim, but seemingly anywhere. You had always 3 rows of students. So you had your 23 judges, 3 rows of students, and if they needed to replace somebody, they took from the rows, etc. But there was a high court of the Shevet. Now, what happens if the high court of the Shevet cannot resolve a dispute? They go higher. So there are 3, what I would call, there are 2 appeals court and a Supreme Court. The 2 appeal courts, one was positioned at the base of Har HaBayit. You had to go to the central capital of Yerushalayim. It wasn't resolved in the court of the Shevet. You weren't allowed to. It had to go there. If that court didn't know the halacha, then you move up to the last appeals court, which is the one on the entrance of the Beit HaMikdash. And if they don't know how to resolve the dispute, then where do they go? They go to the inner sanctum, which is where? Inside the Beit HaMikdash, in the Yun chamber. You know, they know where that place is. You know where that place is. Okay. So, this is the system. None of this was mentioned by Moshe Rabbeinu at the beginning of Devarim. Like, well, wait a minute, there's a whole thing here, you know? There's this court, and then that court, and the third court. We're speaking about his Sari Asaros and Sari Alafim. Nothing. Okay. Not only that, but he introduces here Lo Takir Panim. Sounds familiar? We said that mitzvah already. Hello, we already did this mitzvah. Why are we saying it again? Moshe adds something here. V'lo tikach shochad. No bribery. Why didn't you mention bribery in the very beginning? Why not? Oh, there's a very big difference. Because when do you bribe people? Do you have to bribe your friend? Do you have to bribe your Rebbe? No. When you got a big court system, right, and you're not a cog in that wheel, and you want to make influence, you still spend money, right?
Buy a friend.
You call Kinei L'cha Chaver, right? Buy a friend. But shochad, as a way of disrupting the system, is relevant because we're talking about a much different type of judgment. So let me lay out to what I think just in clear terms. The judges of Chutz La'aretz, even though you can't have a Sanhedrin in Chutz La'aretz, you can only have it when there is a Sanhedrin sitting in Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim can always extend its wisdom outward, okay? But you never have a Sanhedrin in there, and in Chutz La'aretz, you're going to have actually, you will have the Sanhedrin of Chachamim, correct? But it's not going to function the same way the Sanhedrin does. In fact, the last time the Sanhedrin executed anybody, going back to a historical perspective, who was the last person that the Sanhedrin ever executed? Do you know who it was? According to many, Yeshu, Oso Ha'ish. They had abandoned the Sanhedrin for 40 years, already in the time of Herod. Because Herod just flaunted the law, he did whatever he wanted. There was no. And they didn't feel Klal Yisrael could even sustain a court system anymore. That's a very important Mishnah about capital punishment. It's a big machloket in the Mishnah. Are we in favor of capital punishment or not? So Rabbi Akiva and so it says like this: a bezdin that kills once in 7 years, in 7 years is considered a bloody court. Okay? one execution in 7 years. If it kills, Rabbi Elazar Azariah says once in 70 years. And Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon come along and say, if we were in the Sanhedrin, if we were alive at the time Sanhedrin was still executing people, no one would have ever been executed. We're so skilled at messing up the witnesses. Our way of what is it called? Cross-examination? Is that what it's called? Cross-examination? We're going to trip them up. They're going to contradict themselves on some point, because you know what the law is? The law is, if there's a minor detail that you don't ask it, it doesn't prevent the judgment. But if you ask a minor detail, what color was that car that was sitting in front of the house at the time of the murder? And if one guy says it was a blue car, one guy says it was a red car, out. So I'm going to trip these guys up somehow. I'm going to get rid of them. And Rabbi Gamliel says to them, you're marbeh shofchei damim b'Yisrael. You're allowing Jewish blood to be spilled because there's never a fear of being executed. There's a very wide debate about that. Okay? So here, once we get to the book of Shoftim, once we get the Sefer of Shoftim, and by the way, the whole parsha takes on that name, doesn't it? Right? As opposed to the book of Devarim, where we right away speak about Shoftim, but that's not the name of the parsha. That's not what the parsha is known as. So this is for Eretz Yisrael. What we have Shoftim in Parsha Shoftim is talking about in the land of Israel. The ones that Moshe was speaking about was Achad Asar Yom Yichor. We still were on warming up for the land of Israel. It was a prelude. One is a prelude to the other. And I would say not only is it a prelude to it, it's not, you could even look at it this way. You could say one is the end, but this is the beginning. In other words, you have to start with a basic rule of law, right? If you can, well, if you want to maintain that sort of kedusha in Eretz Yisrael, maybe we'll get to that next level of the Shoftim that Moshe describes. You could look at it that way, or you could say, no. If I want to really get to Eretz Yisrael where everybody's bought in to this program of creating kedusha in Eretz Yisrael, we got to start with those non-judgmental judges. We got to bind everybody together. We got to give them options. We have to be democratic. We have to carry them like children. This, by the way, happens to be very brilliant advice, not just for mitzvos, but period, just in terms of organizational design. I once heard this, somebody, a big presenter says, one thing you never do in a congregation is give out too much power early on. Just keep it with a couple of people. And as things build, you'll be able to delegate, right? You got to draw people in. Moshe Rabbeinu is saying you got to get buy-in. You need time. If you try to employ a whole system right from the very beginning, not going to work. You can't start telling them this court, this procedure, that penalty. It's not going to go. It's not going to go. You have to congeal. You have to develop. Okay, so for example.